Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and explore what is honestly a fascinating mystery: how a child's mind actually develops. If you've ever watched a toddler try to figure out a puzzle or a teenager suddenly grasp this really complex, abstract concept, you've witnessed an incredible biological and psychological phenomenon happening right in front of you. But how does that transformation actually happen?
Well, that brings us to the absolute foundational question of cognitive development. How do we learn to think? Like, literally, how is intelligence built from the ground up? Today, we're going to look at this question through two completely distinct academic lenses. We'll be comparing two absolute giants in educational psychology, examining their very different views on what truly drives human understanding. Here's our roadmap for the explainer. We've got Unlocking the Child Mind, Piaget's developmental clock, Bruner's experience model, a quick test your knowledge, and finally, the big takeaways.
Part 1. Piaget's developmental clock. So let's start with Jean Piaget. For Piaget, cognitive growth is this ongoing interaction between a person and the physical world. But, and this is key, it follows a very strict biological clock. He identified these four major sequential stages. He argued that intellectual development is strictly bound to your specific chronological age, starting right from birth and going all the way up to around 15 years old. In his view, there's no way around it. You simply cannot skip a step. Your brain literally has to biologically mature into each of these distinct timeframes to unlock new cognitive abilities. Think about what happens during that very first phase, the sensory motor stage, which is birth to 2 years old. Babies are learning almost entirely through physical actions here. I mean, they're sucking, pushing, grabbing, and shaking literally everything they can get their hands on. And through all that chaotic physical interaction, they hit a massive cognitive milestone: object permanence. This is basically that light bulb moment where they realize mom doesn't magically cease to exist just because she hit her face during peekaboo. They finally understand that things still exist even when they're out of view. And as the child gets older, this builds super rapidly. Between 2 and 7 years old, they enter the pre-operational stage. They're mastering symbols and language, though honestly, their thinking is still highly egocentric at this point. But watch what happens from 7 to 11 in the concrete operational stage. This is a huge leap. That egocentrism drops off and logical thinking kicks right in. They're mastering numbers, classes, and reversibility. Finally, from 11 to 15, the formal operational stage takes over. They've gone from just grabbing a plastic rattle to contemplating the abstract hypothetical rules of the universe. It's wild. Laying all this out in a summary table really pulls the whole journey together beautifully. You can see the clear progression so perfectly, from object permanence in the sensory motor stage, right through early language use in the pre-operational stage, then into logical reasoning, and finally landing on pure abstract thought in that formal operational stage. Moving right along to Part 2, Bruner's experience model. Okay, get ready for a plot twist, because our second theorist, Jerome Bruner, comes along and basically throws that strict biological clock entirely out the window. Let's contrast these two directly. Unlike Piaget's rigid age-based rules, Bruner argues that a child's intellectual ability is driven almost entirely by the nature of their experiences, regardless of how old they actually are. So for Bruner, it's not about your age. It's all about how you're interacting with the world and the specific types of experiences you're using to form concepts in your mind. So instead of 4 age-locked brackets, Bruner breaks development down into these 3 progressive steps. First up is the inactive stage. The child knows the world strictly through physical actions here, learning by doing, not through words or pictures. Next is the iconic stage. Now the child starts focusing on visual images. Information is gained through imagery, and knowledge is stored basically as pictures in their mind. And finally, they hit the symbolic stage. This is where those physical actions and visual images get translated into words, language, and math. The child engages in symbolic activities and builds truly abstract concepts. It's this really beautiful, flowing progression from doing to seeing to symbolizing. All right, Part 3, test your knowledge. Let's see how well you've absorbed these two frameworks. Here's our first question. According to Piaget's sensory motor stage, what is it called when objects continue to exist even when they are hidden from view? Think back to our earlier discussion and that peekaboo analogy. What was the specific technical term for that early milestone? If you guessed object permanence, you hit the nail on the head. That is the defining cognitive achievement of that initial 0 to 2-year-old phase. Let's try question 2. Let's test your grasp on the architects of these theories themselves. The 4 distinct stages of children's intellectual development were identified by which researcher? Was it Skinner, Piaget, Kohlberg, or Erikson?
Who was the famous mind behind that strict, four-step chronological timeline? Spot on. It was Piaget. He's the one who mapped out the sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and formal operational age-based stages.
Okay, for our final quiz question, let's think about what actually fuels this whole progression. According to Piaget, which factor plays an important role in influencing a child's development? Like, what actually drives a child through that biological clock to build those complex cognitive structures?
Exactly. The answer is experience with the physical world. Piaget theorized that cognitive development happens directly as a result of the individual actively interacting with, pushing, grabbing, and just experiencing the physical environment all around them. And finally, part 4, the big takeaways. So, what does this all mean? Let's bring everything together and highlight why understanding both of these frameworks absolutely matters for anyone interested in how we learn. Piaget gives us this brilliant, sequential, age-based clock that helps us understand the biological limits of a growing mind. Bruner, on the flip side, gives us a really flexible, experience-based progression, reminding us that doing, seeing, and symbolizing are powerful tools no matter your age. But notice the big thing they both agree on. Learning is an active journey. We have to interact with the world to grow. In fact, as our source material brilliantly points out, a true sign of intelligence in a young child is their ability to adjust themselves to a new environment. It is definitely not just the ability to cram long essays really fast. True intelligence is all about active adaptation.
I'm going to leave you with this final, provocative thought to ponder. If Piaget's focus on age gives us the baseline timeline of what a brain can handle, and Bruner's focus on experience gives us the actual tools to build understanding, how can we reshape our homes, our schools, and our environments to maximize a learner's cognitive potential? I highly encourage you to look at every learning moment going forward as this delicate, beautiful balance between time and experience. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep exploring.